Man, I mean, like when I got into nootropics, my entire life changed. Like my productivity doubled. I was able to induce focus on cue, motivation on cue. I just felt amazing. Aniracetam, oxiracetam, 9-methyl-B-carboline. Like the choices are endless, and what you can do if you're stacking effectively, it's incredible. What's up, everybody? It's your boy Ryan, and welcome to episode number 140 of the Cortex Labs Nootropics podcast. It's great to be with you. So we're going to talk about nootropic expert level usage of NALT, which is N-acetyl L-tyrosine. I'll get into sort of the intro, what it's really a building block of, or a precursor for, how it works once it gets into your brain, why NALT even exists, but then interestingly, what you can do with NALT in terms of stacking it with other compounds to get really, really good brain performance. In the meantime, what supports this broadcast is Epic Nootropic products at livecortex.com. Number one, the Cortex stack. I mean, look, motivation, mental energy, verbal fluency, drive to work in a capsule. Get Cortex at livecortex.com. Perfect subscription price, $27.99 a month. And if you buy it on subscription, you get Smarter, Better, Faster for free. That is a digital book that shows you how to surgically use nootropics. If you're new to nootropics, Nootropics Ground Zero is a video course that I created for people that are new. You have to start there. It'll save you 3 years. In a couple years, but want to ascend to the 6-year mark, Nootropics Masterclass is where you have to be. And if you want to skip that and go all the way to the 10-year plus mark where people are getting incredible results, where the distinctions are endless, and you just know how to induce states on cue with nootropics and use them correctly, get the Nootropics God course. Lastly, if you'd like to work with me on either a 3.5-month or a 6-month capacity, really formulating tailored nootropic stacks and otherwise supplement regimens that get you to fire on all cylinders, this is my specialty. Go to livecortex.com, book a consult. Let's get into it. All right, so let's talk about NALT. So let's first discuss what it is chemically. It's an acetylated version and a more soluble version of tyrosine that offers better absorption, meaning it's a quicker onset when you take it than regular tyrosine. And then you end up with the same sort of stimulatory effect, maybe even a little more pronounced because it sort of onsets quicker. Anecdotally, for me, the difference between tyrosine and NALT is, first of all, the quickness of the onset. So instead of it being 25 minutes, which is what tyrosine would usually give me an effect from, and then I'd have the effect for 1 to 3 hours or something, NALT hits me like 10, 15 minutes, maybe even less. I mean, I swear I take NALT and I'm like, wow, I feel it like instantly. It's pretty quick. Ultimately, so that's where I think the benefit lies, but ultimately the research shows that if you take NALT versus tyrosine, you end up with the same amount of plasma tyrosine, right? It ultimately doesn't equal more blood tyrosine. I think you probably end up having more blood tyrosine in the beginning stages of the effect duration window. The actual mechanism of action once you have stable, plasma tyrosine from NALT is the synthesis of the neurotransmitters norepinephrine and dopamine. So it is a critical part in the process of your brain's creation from various precursors, if you will, of norepinephrine rather, and dopamine. It's clinically proven to have antidepressant effects, and anecdotally, in the nootropics community, provides a quick and easy stimulant effect that lasts anywhere from like 1 to 3 hours. It's not very long-lived. That's why we're going to talk about using it super surgically, but it's useful. Look, I mean, if you're in a pinch and need 2 hours of good stimulant energy, then NALT it's actually amazing for that. Interestingly, also in the literature, NALT has the ability to induce a thing called mitohormesis, which is a cytoprotective response that takes place in reaction to reactive oxygen species, sort of a toning down of the oxidative damage, if you will, which is really, really interesting. But its relevance to us as nootropics enthusiasts really comes in its ability to better synthesize dopamine and to better synthesize norepinephrine in a quicker way than regular tyrosine. Okay, so NALT nasal spray is an actual product available at some nootropics vendors. I think right now Nootropics Depot has like a combo caffeine NALT nasal spray, so that might be something to look into. Again, you're getting caffeine with each spray. Together it's going to be very stimulating. Those two together, N-acetyl L-tyrosine and caffeine, are stimulating. And, I just looked around, and right now, not many vendors or no vendors have in stock regular NALT spray. But like Lift Mode and the Depot, and I think the Source have regular NALT powder, which absolutely suffices. But if you get a spray, you're probably looking at the 100 to 115 milligrams per spray dose range, which means you should probably be spraying it like a half a spray or something, like a small spray, not a full spray, because that's, insulfating an nootropic, meaning putting it up your nose in a liquid capacity, is certainly a heavier hitting than taking powder. So that's NALT, okay? Let's get to some use strategies. So NALT by itself, okay, this is where, like I was explaining before, in a pinch, it's actually really useful. If you were to take 100 milligrams of NALT by itself, let's say like you were at you went to a seminar and you were going to be like social with people and you didn't particularly have the energy, maybe you had some coffee and some food and you're like, all right, I don't know, I'm not really into this, not feeling it. If you were to dose 100 milligrams of NALT, probably within 20, 30 minutes, you would certainly feel a lot more stimulated, right? You'd be synthesizing more dopamine and norepinephrine almost immediately, and you'd have some energy, right? Some good energy to go and mingle and interact with people in this seminar or whatever. Now, apply that to whatever it is you do. Like if you're waking up in the morning and, you have some coffee and you have eggs or oatmeal or whatever you eat for breakfast, and then you're going to sit down to work and you're like, should I take a nootropic stack today, or should I just is there something simple I can do? 100 milligrams of NALT with your coffee, and you should be in a pretty interesting place. So use that as a standalone strategy. 100 milligrams of NALT by itself is actually very powerful, and I do that every now and then. A higher level strategy would be to use NALT as a synergistic component to an energy stack, okay? Using NALT as a synergistic additional component to an energy stack. And that kind of terminology you can learn if you get either Nootropics Ground Zero, Nootropics Masterclass, or Nootropics God Course. Really what we're talking about is you have a stack, and then somewhere layered in at the latter end of that stack, if you're looking at, the different elements of the stack, like on paper or something, you've got in this case, NALT, but some compound that synergizes with the rest of the stack, but really isn't the base of the stack. It's not the primary heavy hitter. It's just meant to be used as sort of a synergistic additional component. So let's take this stack, for example. 100 milligrams teacrine, 40 milligrams theobromine, 50 milligrams NALT, 50 milligrams L-theanine. Now, what this stack is going to do is turn up energy, right? You have teacrine as your base, working on the adenosine receptors, giving you energy, blocking tiredness. To solidify that, you've got theobromine in the mix. Then you have your 50 milligrams of NALT, and then 50 milligrams of theanine. I usually in stacks like this put theanine in for good measure, because you have three stimulants here, man. You've got teacrine, theobromine, and NALT. And the combination of those three together, that should be a podcast in and of itself, because that will crank up the amperage on brain energy. So just a little bit of L-theanine, kind of commensurate with the rest of the stack. 50 milligrams will actually suffice. Balances the stack out well enough where it's not like it's slowing down the stimulation, but it puts you in a great stimulated but clean focus place, okay? That would be strategy number 2. Strategy number 1, again, was 100 milligrams of NALT by itself, and then strategy 2 is using NALT as a synergistic additional component to an energy stack. Again, the stack being 100 of teacrine, 40 of theobromine, 50 of NALT, and then 50 of L-theanine. The last level up that I'm going to talk about in this podcast is using NALT in a racetam stack or a cholinergic stack, getting both the acetylcholine synthesis, or in some cases the greater efficiency of the usage of acetylcholine and thus focus and memory, and at the same time you're getting this catecholamine synthesis, the norepinephrine and the dopamine synthesis. Alpha Brain actually somewhat does this, like using cholinergics with tyrosine. They're not using NALT, but they're using regular tyrosine. They have like alpha GPC, some huperzine serrata, which is huperzine A, and then they've got tyrosine in the mix, and then a few other compounds. And that's an interesting stack because it's making you synthesize and make more acetylcholine, and at the same time getting you to release more dopamine and more norepinephrine. But to capitalize on this in a really effective way, we would do a stack using one of my favorite microdosing strategies with aniracetam and oxiracetam. And that stack would look like this: 200 milligrams aniracetam, 300 milligrams oxiracetam, 40 milligrams CDP choline, 75 milligrams NALT, and 30 milligrams of L-theanine. All right, now I want to break this stack down because there's actually a lot going on here above and beyond the power of NALT being in the stack. So microdosing aniracetam and oxiracetam, this is a strategy that, like, it seems on the outset of just looking at it like, well, that's ridiculous. I mean, you've got small doses. The average doses are 500 to 700 or even more or whatever. But what I figured out is, like, I transcended into the world of understanding that the classical research and what people typically say about dosing on nootropics usually applies to people with severe cognitive dysfunction. And usually that's relating to folks that are up there in age and running into neurodegenerative diseases. I mean, ultimately, that's where these racetams specifically were studied, for. But what I found out is that regular Joes certainly could benefit from higher doses of racetams, but also interestingly benefit in a very sustainable way from a stack like this: 200 milligrams aniracetam, 300 milligrams oxiracetam, and then your choline source. That's just an aside. Microdosing racetams together is a very effective strategy to get good brain performance. Adding a strategy into a strategy, you could also, and a lot of people that I have worked with get benefit from doing something like that. And then 3.5, 4 hours later, when that basically wears off, dosing a slightly smaller doses, but still microdoses is the same thing. So, in 4 hours, they'll just dose 150 of aniracetam and like 200 of oxiracetam, and then probably a little less choline, somewhere around 20 milligrams CDP choline. Okay, so that's a strategy within a strategy. So back to the stack. You've got the 200 of aniracetam, 300 of oxiracetam, 40 of CDP choline, then 75 milligrams of NALT. And then you've got 30 milligrams of theanine just to balance off that little potential for extra stimulation. This is a killer stack because you are synthesizing more acetylcholine. You're releasing from the hippocampus more acetylcholine, and that'll foster working memory and general focus. You are modulating AMPA receptor function, which is a glutamate subtype, which will give you some energy kind of right away. Aniracetam and oxiracetam both do that, actually. And that offers sort of a, almost an instant kind of energy feeling, like the type of feeling like, get you to want to do stuff that you're like putting off or something. But then you have NALT. NALT in the mix with this stack is then adding this extra many benefits, really, in the dopamine and norepinephrine synthesis category. So now you got more dopamine and you have more norepinephrine. So on top of the stimulation and the processing that you have from the racetams together, you now have this like energy component to it, which the racetams, combining those racetams and choline sources give you energy, too, first. But then you're adding this additional element of NALT to it. I mean, this is actually a pretty powerful stack. That's why I've got theanine in here. So then, we've got 30 milligrams of theanine to kind of balance it out. 200 of aniracetam, 300 of oxiracetam, 40 of CDP choline, 75 of NALT, and 30 milligrams of theanine is a great high-level way to use N-acetyl L-tyrosine. I want to clarify, too, on this stack, and some stacks that I've been putting out lately. This is sort of a topic via email. Folks were asking me and a couple people on the YouTube channel, why has my dosing for the choline sources lowered from its already lower dose that I've previously been suggesting to people? Well, look, it hasn't ultimately totally changed completely. It's just that what I have seen in consulting specifically, and I mean, high-level business people pay us a lot of money to make their brains function bulletproof throughout the course of a 16-hour workday, is that more people than not respond to these lower doses of citicholine than higher doses. That's just what I'm seeing. So it turns out that this stack itself, which is a stack that I took recently, kills it. Again, 200 milligrams aniracetam, 300 oxiracetam, 40 of CDP choline, 75 milligrams NALT. That's where you insert the NALT. And then 30 milligrams of L-theanine. killer stack that basically kind of gives you everything. So, if you're wanting one of those beast stacks that give you every facet of brain function, take that stack. If you want to manipulate the doses, go for it, but I wouldn't go any higher than like 100 milligrams on the NALT because it'll become overstimulating. So let's run through all this stuff again, okay? N-acetyl L-tyrosine is an acetylated and more soluble version of tyrosine. It offers a little better absorption than regular tyrosine, and what that tells me and what I've seen in myself and in working with folks is that makes it a quicker onset and a slightly more stimulatory effect right away. Like your best power from NALT is going to be in the first hour and a half. Ultimately, though, you're going to end up with the same amount of plasma tyrosine. And that's probably because like when this study that I'm referring to there was actually done, they may have done it at a later time. Like they may have waited 30 minutes, 40 minutes, an hour or something, and then measured plasma tyrosine, and it ends up being the same amount, right? The mechanism of action, or the thing you need to know, is basically that NALT is going to help the synthesis of the neurotransmitters norepinephrine and dopamine, and that is very useful. Clinically, it's proven to have antidepressant effects, which is also very useful for a variety of people. And anecdotally, in the nootropics community, it provides a quick and easy stimulant effect. In the literature, NALT induces mitohormesis, which again is a protective response in reaction to reactive oxygen species. But again, its synthesis of dopamine and norepinephrine is where it hits home for us. You can get NALT nasal spray out there. It's hard to find. I think the depot right now has NALT plus caffeine, which is a very interestingly stimulating combination and certainly works for a good bit of people. But ultimately, powdered NALT will provide you a very, very effective response. The strategies in this podcast were 100 milligrams NALT by itself. Higher level would be a stack of 100 of teocrine, 40 of theobromine, 50 of NALT, and then 50 of theanine. And then the last strategy was using NALT and a racetam or cholinergic stack. You're getting both. You're getting the acetylcholine synthesis and the catecholamine synthesis at the same time. And that stack, again, was 200 milligrams aniracetam, 300 oxyracetam, 40 CDP choline, 75 of NALT, and 30 milligrams of L-theanine. What is NALT in the general scale of things, like looking at all the tools in the arsenal that we have as nootropics enthusiasts and brain performance hackers? What role does it play? Well, it's hard to say. I've gotten NALT in a good bit of stacks for some of my clients, and these are some of the people that just need to be synthesizing more dopamine and norepinephrine. And others, I don't really have NALT because they're not at the point where we need that. We may bring it in every now and then as just a stimulant. For me, though, in my personal kind of nootropics escapades, which is the highlight of my life, honestly, is waking up, having a coffee, taking a stack, and then getting to town on things, sometimes I take it by itself. Coffee and NALT, 100 milligrams, boom, I'm in. And I'm in for at least 2 hours, and I just get a lot of work knocked out. Again, I stack it with racetams. I stack it with other energy compounds. It really ends up being in the mix for me over a 30-day period, probably 5-6 times NALT. That's where it ends up. And that's right on par with what you should be doing in terms of cycling different nootropic compounds. So it's not any less significant than any of the other nootropics that we talk about. It's not more significant than any of the other nootropics we talk about. It is just a powerful weapon to have in the arsenal. And, just more variability, another compound that can do what we want it to do, which ultimately is to improve acute brain performance. Thank you so much for being with me on this episode 140 of the Cortex Labs Nootropics podcast. Look, insane nootropic products at livecortex.com. And we just changed some things around to give you guys some more benefit from what you get. The Cortex stack. If you want a mental energy, motivation, verbal fluency, get you to do things type of stack, get into gear. It should have just been called gear. Get Cortex, do it at livecortex.com. Perfect subscription price at $27.99. If you do Cortex on a subscription capacity, you actually get Smarter, Better, Faster, a surgical guide to using nootropics. It's a PDF book for free. You get it for free. That's it. Once and done, you'll have it forever. It's got tons of stacks and tons of strategy in there. If you're new to nootropics, Nootropics Ground Zero. If you're in a couple years and want to extend to the 6-year mark, Nootropics Masterclass. Those are both video courses. And then if you want to go to the God level, the highest level of expertise on the internet, on the web and in the world at this point in terms of courses and literature, Nootropics God Course is where you have to be. You can find all those products at livecortex.com. Lastly, I want to say the 3.5 month and the 6 month consults. If you're looking to get on board with me, whether you're a Silicon Valley entrepreneur and you need brain performance all day, or you're another otherwise business owner and you need to function at peak capacity, hire me. This is what we do. It is what I love. My job is to make your brain function at 150% from the time that you start working until the time that you wind down. And if we've got to make your sleep bulletproof to facilitate that, we'll do it. If we've got to make your testosterone bulletproof in order to facilitate that, we'll do it. If we have to increase your energy to be aligned with the results that we'll get from nootropics, we will do that. 3.5 month option or 6 month option. Only for the big boys. Do that at livecortex.com. Thank you so much for listening, everybody. Talk to you next time. Ascend to the 10-year mark in using nootropics.